And in a sunless realm, the sun rose at last. The light of dawn was palpable on Ra's armour, as well as his skin. It was a pressure, a presence with searing physicality. The enemy hordes felt it as acid on their skin. The creatures, demons no matter what secular truths held strong, lost what little order they had ever possessed. "The anathema!" Ra heard their frantic agony as a sick scraping on the edges of his mind. "The anathema comes! The sun rises!" His features were those of one born in the wild lands of ancient Eurasia. His skin was a Terran blend of bronze and burnt umber. His eyes darker still. His hair darkest of all. The long black fall of his hair was held by a simple circlet crown of metal leaves, binding the mane back from his face so he could fight. More practical than regal. He moved as a man moved, coming through the straining ranks of his guardians on foot, pushing through the press of bodies on the rare instances they didn't instinctively move aside for him. He wore gold, as all of his guardians wore gold. The same sigils of Terran unity and imperial nobility that showed on their armour were cast thricefold upon his own. His armour joints didn't growl with the crude industrial snarl of mass-manufactured legionary plate, but purred with the song of older, purer technologies. On his back, held by a simple strap against his flowing red cloak, was an ornate bolter of black and bronze. In his hand, he carried a sword, one that looked nothing like the blade portrayed in the victory murals and illustrated sagas. By the standards of Terran lords and kings, it was inarguably beautiful, but in the grip of the ruler of an entire species it was, perhaps, rather plain. A weapon to wield, a tool for shedding blood, not an ornament to be admired. Impossibly complicated circuitry latticed its blade, black and coppery against a silver so hallowed it was almost blue. In other wars, on other worlds, he had greeted his custodians with subtle telepathy, speaking their names as he passed them before a battle. Here he was more restrained, moving to the embattled front rank without offering any acknowledgement at all. Of the Neverborn, some broke ranks and fled. These cowardly shards of their vile masters knew that destruction had come. Some tore into each other, cannibalizing their kindred for strength in the face of destruction. Some lost what little grasp they had on corporeality, their forms melting and dissolving before the sword-wielding monarch even reached the front lines. The strongest raged at the sin of his existence. With a gestalt bellow loud enough to shake the windless air of this alternate reality, they fought to reach their archenemy. Ra was at the Emperor's side, spear whirling, lashing out to punch through the amorphous bodies of flailing blue creatures that wailed through their many mouths. Sweat baked in his face inside his helm. The blood in his muscles was heavier than liquid lead. "Order, sire!" The Emperor raised his sword in a two-handed grip. As his knuckles tightened, the geography of circuitry ignited along his blade's length, spitting electrical fire and wreathing the sword's lengths in flame. He didn't speak. He didn't look at any of his warriors. The sword came down. The webway caught fire. Shapes raged in the flames, shadows and suggestions doing battle with the demons, their fiery forms indistinct and ever-changing, the fire-born avatars of fallen 10,000, knee-deep in psychic fire and thrusting with lances of flames, the silhouette of space marines, the betrayed dead of Istvan, bearing axes and blades and claws, half-seen sigils of slaughtered legions obscured by the ash on their blackened armour. A giant among giants, its great hands bared and ready as it seared forwards at the crest of the tidal fire, the 10th son of a dying empire, so briefly reborn in his father's immolating wrath. Demons burned in their thousands, their etheric flesh seared from their false bones, white-flamed, haloed from the sword in corrosive, purifying radiance. It coruscated in thrashing waves from each fall of the Emperor's blade. To look at him was to go blind. To stand before him was to die. Torrents of chemical fire marked Jun Mandao's position to Ra's left. Ra could hear the draconic roar of incendium pikes burning the still thrashing creatures that had fallen beneath the blades of the custodian's first rank. The 10,000 and their golden king were shin-deep in ash, the smoky spectres of demonic entities flailing as they were swallowed by the Emperor's fire. The demons that managed to reach the Emperor suffered worst of all. The strongest, most savage of their kind, they swung weapons at a man who was no longer there, cleaving through the golden mist that swelled in his place. With thunder cracks of psychic force, the golden warlord would peer at the beast's back, his flaming sword already buried in their spines. Fire erupted behind their eyes, boiling and bursting them from within. The sizzling gore soaked Ra and the custodians closest to their sire. Exaltation quickened Ra's blood, the cure to the weariness that had slowed him. He was tired beyond belief, yet that had never mattered so little. Each beat of his still living heart was vengeance, vindication. "We're winning," He could feel it in the renewed curses and oaths across the voxes the 10,000 advanced. They weren't just holding their ground. Whatever genius the Emperor had worked on in order to stand with them in this fire hour had worked. Nothing could stand before them. The Emperor turned to Ra, hurling his sword as a spear. It lanced over the custodian's shoulder, driving to the hilt in the skull of a creature Ra barely even saw before it was reduced to a burning sludge. In a flare of sun-enriched mist, the blade was back in the Emperor's hand, spinning, falling, killing. And still the Emperor advanced. A reptilian canine leapt at him, only to rip through the air where he had been standing. It gurgled molten blood as the Emperor's sword manifested within its throat. The warlord clutched it in place a second long before ripping it free and moving on. Still the enemy came, a tide, a flood. Ra stole glances back to the Wraithbone gateway, so incongruous against the Mechanicum's machinery, watching robed unifiers passing into the blue mist, escorted by packs of the last surviving Silent Sisters. Soon enough, only the 10,000 remained at their master's side. Right, so that was an excerpt from The Master of Mankind. So I want to say a huge thanks to user codename Ashloth on Reddit in the 40k lore section. It's honestly, The Master of Mankind is one of my favourite books in the whole Horus Heresy series. If you haven't read it, I genuinely, wholeheartedly recommend you go and read it. It adds so much depth to the Emperor and the inner machinations of the Imperium itself that you, I can't put into words in like this little outro section of the video just how damn good that book is. So if you haven't read it, please go do. And thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.